This is the Teachable Soul podcast. Because we cannot possibly live long enough to make all the mistakes ourselves, let's take a few moments to learn from the mistakes of others. The Teachable Soul podcast, where guests and listeners like you share stories of failure and teachable moments on the journey to success. Here's your host, Kat Daniels.
Welcome back to the Teachable Soul podcast. I am your host, Kat Daniels, and today with me, I have the pleasure of interviewing Miss Helen Snape, who is a nature lover and recovering people pleaser, such as myself. She left a 19-year career in human resources and an abusive marriage to follow her calling and become a transformational relationship coach. She is passionate about helping overgivers stop saying yes to everyone else so that they can say yes to themselves and have the best relationships of their lives. She went from being a good girl on the verge of a breakdown and unlearning a lot of what she thought she knew about relationships to having healthy relationships, which I think is something that we can all learn and start to do now. So welcome, Helen.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. So do you want to start by telling us where it all started or ended, as it were?
Yeah. Oh gosh, how long have we got?
Right.
Yeah. So for me and for basically everyone I speak to that is a people pleaser or a recovering people pleaser, they all say like they've all been like it their whole lives. And that is certainly true for me. You know, when I really started to understand this stuff, I realized that I had grown up as you say, as the good girl. You know, I wanted to make everyone happy and I would do my best to fit in with whoever I was with. So like, I remember, you know, with my kind of my hippie friends, then I would be a hippie, you know, with my studious friends, I would be really like academic, you know, at home, I would be the dutiful daughter. And then when I started going out to work, I would be like the model employee. Mm-hmm. So I was a bit of a chameleon because I felt like I had to make other people happy. And I thought that was a great way to be, you know, because it's really like, sounds really unselfish. Mm-hmm. And like, who doesn't like a giver?
Right.
Yeah. And
who
of course, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And of course, in the workplace, like this got taken advantage of because I was the person that would say yes to anything. So if there was, you know, a new project that came up, or if a colleague needed help, you know, meeting a deadline, then I would say, well, I can help. Mm-hmm. And I would just take on more and more work. Yeah. And you would think that would like lead to me getting a promotion or something, right?
Wouldn't we think?
Wouldn't we think that? But sadly, no, that doesn't happen.
Right.
Instead, I just kept given more and more work. Mm-hmm. And it led to overwork. And eventually I started to get repetitive strain injury in my hands and then in my wrists and then in my arms and my shoulders. But I wasn't going to let that stop me.
Right.
God, no.
Even though you're dying in pain. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, can't let it stop you.
Ignored the pain. The pain. Yeah, until I literally couldn't type anymore. And that was my first wake up call.
Yeah.
That was my first wake up call in the context of work, that I'm doing something wrong here.
Right.
And I remember going to see the doctor and, you know, got all the kind of medical advice about how to, you know, come back from having repetitive strain injury and how to kind of take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. But I remember getting a book about repetitive strain injury, and it said, you know, it's also about who you are as a person. Like what drives you to go to these extremes in your work. And that kind of just started it planted a seed. Planted a seed.
Love those seeds.
Yes, it did plant a seed. But I think where the people pleasing really came out was in my personal relationships. And you probably are aware of the whole thing of, you know, good girl meets bad boy, and there's just something, we just attract each other. We just attract the wrong guys. We're like magnets to each other.
Yeah. right?
If only that wasn't the case. So for me, you know, after a couple of kind of failed boyfriends, you know, I fell for the first guy that really paid any attention to me, because I wasn't asking the question, is this guy good for me? I was just saying to myself, oh, wow, somebody finally likes me. You know, finally, somebody is paying me attention. And I just basked in the light of this attention and completely ignored the red flags that were there. And I got sucked into a marriage that was with a narcissist, with somebody that was very controlling. Mm-hmm. And as I say, the red flags were there. And that's something we can kind of talk about a bit more. But I just had blinkers on. You know, I was young, I was in love, right? You know, met my husband at university, and, you know, was kind of swept off my feet for a while. And I just carried on, and we struggled in our relationship, and I was trying so hard, and I just kept trying harder and harder.
Yeah.
I didn't actually step back and think, maybe this isn't working. Mm-hmm. I just kept trying harder and harder to make it work, to make him happy.
Yeah, because we're fixers, right?
Yeah.
We think we can fix the world.
Yes. And he played into that, right? Mm-hmm. And this carried on for 18 years.
Yeah. It's amazing how long we'll like put up with stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it wasn't until my mum got diagnosed with an incurable cancer that I really got my wake up call. So I hadn't really been speaking to my parents for most of my marriage because, you know, my husband had made sure to cut me off from my family.
Right.
But sort of over the last few years, I had began to get back in touch with my parents. And when I got this call from my mum, you know, to say about her diagnosis, that was a real wake-up call. You know, it made me realize how short life is, how precious life is. And there was this quiet, still voice in my head which was saying, Helen, you deserve a better life than this. Mm-hmm. Like, you deserve something better than just being miserable and feeling lonely all the time, even though you're married. And that was the wake-up call for me to go and get help. I didn't know what I wanted at that point at all. I just knew that I was really confused. I was so miserable. And I just thought, if I carry on like this much longer, I'm going to have a complete breakdown. And so that's kind of where things started to turn around for me. I went to see a therapist who told me that I wasn't going crazy and helped me see, you know, what was going on in my marriage and supported me in my decision to leave, which was probably the scariest thing that I've ever done in my life, actually. It was literally a case of packing my bags one day and leaving and just not looking back. Right. Like, just completely cutting off my husband from my life.
Did he know you were leaving?
No.
You couldn't tell him?
No, I thought about it a lot, and I was scared of what his reaction would be, both towards myself and also towards himself. And I felt it was safest for me to just leave.
And you've never spoken to him again?
No.
That's fantastic. I know how, not only hard that can be, but it's scary to do. It's scary to leave any relationship at all, whether it be a work relationship or a friend relationship or, you know, your marriage. It's scary and hard and new and completely different. And, you know, it's something that you really have to recover from. And it's a loss at the same time, you know.
You have
to grieve it.
That's right. And that is something that was a bit of a shock to me. I knew that I would feel terrible when I immediately left.
Right.
Because I was still in love with my husband, even though it was awful.
Right.
I still loved him. And
Yeah.
I expected that kind of loss. But I think what I hadn't appreciated was grieving the loss of the dream.
Oh, man. Right?
Yeah.
No, I've completely been in that situation. I was very much in love with actually my son's father, biological father. And I mean, it's, we decided to part ways in one way or another. And I couldn't bring myself to speak to him, because if I did, I was afraid that I would fall back into, the trap basically of being in love with him. And while I did love him and I felt positively towards him, I had to retrain my brain. And I knew I had to do this, was to retrain my brain to not love him, because it was 100% not a healthy situation for me to be in. And I think and I was 18, 19, 20, when I decided all those things, but it was hard, and it was hard to let go of the dream. I wanted a whole life with him and many, many children, and, to share my life with him. Because while we were in the relationship, it was generally okay. But I think it was because he was also pretty much just doing and saying whatever, like a chameleon, whatever he thought I needed to hear. But unfortunately, you need honesty in a relationship, because that's important, and not being a chameleon,
Yeah.
You can't just be everything that someone needs all the time.
No. And that was the problem, in my relationship with my husband. I just put him first all the time, and he just lapped that up.
Right.
So whatever he wanted to do, we would do.
Yeah.
Even if it was something that, I hated. So, typically, we would go, for example, to see a film that he liked. But perhaps a more extreme example is, he wanted to go rock climbing, and I'm terrified of heights.
Yeah.
But I went to the rock climbing center with him, because he wanted to do it.
Right.
And I wanted to be the supportive wife. And I was absolutely terrified. I mean, I have to laugh about it. You got to laugh about these things, otherwise you just cry.
Right.
But that's kind of how insane it was.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, I still do things now with my husband that, so like he is an introvert and I'm an extrovert. And I am a people pleaser. So for the longest time, I mean, like I said, I'm working on it, but for the longest time, when we would go out on like date nights or something, he would much prefer to just go to a movie and come home. But now we go to dinner, because that's my thing, and a movie, and then come home. Because
it's compromise. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And eating out is a big deal to me. I don't know why. Just the way I was raised, I guess, but like eating, out in a restaurant for some reason is important to me. And he hates it. So we go to dinner, and then we go to a movie, which he loves, and then we come home.
Yeah. Whereas, when I very first left my marriage, just simple things like thinking about, God, what do I eat? Or like, what do I wear?
Right.
It was also overwhelming, because I'd never thought about what I wanted.
Yeah.
Like even, not, forget the big dreams of life.
Right.
I was like, even the small things, I was like, what do I like? What do I like doing? And I really had to go on this journey of rediscovering myself, and what I like, what I don't like, what I'm good at. And that's been an amazing journey, but also a hard one at times too.
For sure. Were you able to start that journey while you were married, or did you wait, or did you have to wait until after you left to do that?
it started when I left.
When you left?
I think when I was in the marriage, my head was too confused, because I was in survival mode. So it was hard for me to think straight some of the time. My concentration was terrible. My memory was terrible. And, I was being kind of gaslighted by my husband and, and being told that, black was blue.
Right.
It was hard to think at all for myself.
Right. It's so interesting to me psychologically how abuse works like that, because when you're in a situation like that, you're so confused, and it almost feels like your brain is just cloudy, and you can't think for yourself, even if you wanted to, because it's so confusing. And it's just crazy to me how that works. So you're now a transformational relationship coach.
Yeah.
Which you just lit up when I said, and makes me so excited. So tell me about how you started that journey to become that.
My working history is in human resources. And I did a little bit of coaching as part of that, particularly using sort of personality profiling systems. A few people suggested to me, have you thought of becoming a coach? Because it's the kind of thing that would just suit me. I ignored them for a while, but then the opportunity came for me to leave my job, and it was just the right timing. So I went and I trained as a transformational coach with the idea that I would become an HR consultant and do some career coaching and some consultancy and some mediation and all, had this little vision going.
Right.
But of course, when you do something like a coaching diploma, you go on your own journey of self-development.
Yeah.
And I realized, if I'm going to be doing this full time, I need to do something that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah.
And I realized that what that is helping women that are in the same place that I was 5 years ago. Because I believe that we all deserve to live a life that we love, and that we can only really do that when we have healthy relationships. And a lot of us grew up not seeing the healthiest of relationships.
Right.
And of course, we're not taught this stuff at school.
No. Or at home, even if it is a healthy relationship. I have a friend who I consider her parents, they've been married forever. They're very successful. They don't abuse each other. They don't yell at each other ever. They're fairly healthy compared to some of the other things I've personally seen, but they've never talked to their kids about how to have a healthy relationship. They've been the example, but it's, my friend has gone on to not have healthy relationships because nobody's ever flat out told her, boundaries are important. Knowing what you want are important. Here's what boundaries even means. Nobody talks about that.
No, it's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. So I believe that we can all learn to have healthy relationships.
Yeah.
And key to that is our relationship with ourselves, and learning about things like boundaries and self-confidence and healthy relationship communication skills, stuff that builds up a healthy relationship. That is why I wanted to go into transformational relationship coaching. I mainly work with women that are recovering from people pleasing. So they've got to that point where they are sick and tired of repeating the same patterns and getting into the same bad relationships, and they're ready to do something about it,
which is an important step. I know another coach who is she's a coach for married women who want to reclaim themselves, and she has her, like, all of her stuff says reclaim you, basically, which I think is awesome. But she usually works with people who are still in the relationship, which is equally important.
Yes. Yeah. I work with people that are in relationships or people that are looking for relationships, because I think each can kind of teach you something different. Because if you're in a relationship, whether it's going well or it's not, there's always going to be lessons that you can learn from your interactions with your partner.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So can you speak on, so did you leave your job and your abusive marriage at the same time or around the same time?
Not too far from each other, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you mean for it to happen that way?
I think it was divine timing. I honestly do. Yeah, I do. I mean, it was amazing that when I left my job to go and do my coaching training, and I suddenly had all this free time at the same time that I started that coaching journey, the same month, my mother was told that she only had either weeks or months left to live. And at first I didn't know if I was going to continue with my coaching journey. But I realized that it was an amazing gift for me to be able to go and spend a lot more time with her, because I was no longer in a full-time job,
right,
and having to juggle that. So yeah, sometimes these things, happen for a reason.
Oh, they certainly do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what kind of cancer did your mom have?
She had a cancer called myeloma, which is kind of cancer in the bone marrow. So it's one that is throughout your whole body. And it's one that can be kind of relapsing, remitting. So you can have periods where you're kind of okay, and then you're ill for a while, and you get treatment. And it's very variable. How long people can live with it for. One day hopefully there will be a cure for it. But yeah, it's very hard to see someone you love go through it.
Yeah, that sounds awful. I watched my dad go through the end stages of lung cancer, and that is just, I've watched my grandma go of cancer. She had breast cancer, and it's to see someone deteriorate like that is rough in general. It's not really, honestly, the death part that upset me as much as the deterioration, I think, for me personally.
Yeah. And again, coming back to, we were talking about grief.
Yeah.
What perhaps I didn't realize at the time, but looking back on it, I realized that all those months leading up to her death, I was going through an anticipatory grief.
Yeah.
Because I knew that the end was coming. I didn't know exactly when.
Yeah.
But so I was already grieving the fact that she was going to go.
Yeah.
And then, of course, once she did die, then there's just all the normal grief that follows as well.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Grief is a rough beast to manage all on its own. And there, people are like, oh, there's stages of grief, but grief is different for everybody. And yeah. So, I mean, that's rough. Did you have to go to, or did you desire to go to any of, we got called for grief groups and stuff like that? Did you do any of that?
I didn't. We were offered support from the local hospice.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, but I think at that point I was working through it, with my partner. Yeah,
that's good that you were able
and
to.
really spent the time to feel my feelings, which is something when I was in people pleaser mode that I would just routinely ignore,
right?
because I was so busy looking after everyone else.
Yeah,
it was a real inconvenience to have all these annoying feelings,
right?
So I would just squish them away and try to ignore them. And of course, when I was with my husband, quite often, he would kind of be reinforcing it. So he would, so I might say, oh, well, I'm upset about what you said, and he would just he wouldn't believe me. Or he either wouldn't believe me or he would say I was wrong. I was wrong for feeling that way.
Yeah.
Overreacting. You're too sensitive. You've no right to feel that way. And because I didn't know any different, I thought, oh, you must be right. And so, these bad feelings, I must try and ignore them. But of course they don't go away. They just get stored up in your body and cause trouble.
Right. Yeah. Which you mentioned that you were having trouble whenever you were working to the point that you couldn't type, right?
Yeah.
Have you been able to overcome that, or how does that work now?
I have overcome it. Yes.
Great.
I think it's something that I will probably have to be mindful of for, the rest of my life. So I have, I still have a lovely ergonomic mouse, which looks very strange. But I think my whole body when I was in my marriage was just so unhappy. So I would get ill much more frequently. But I think my whole body was just tense.
Oh, yeah.
My whole body was tense. I didn't know it was, because it was what became normal for me. So if you like, my starting point was tense. I was probably breathing more shallowly, and that doesn't help with things like repetitive strain injury. It just helps contribute to it, that you're not getting enough breath into your body. But since I've left my marriage, since I've been focusing more on self-care, I haven't had a recurrence of repetitive strain injury.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Great.
Yeah. Because I'm taking much more care of myself.
Right. Which, before I hadn't realized that, people would say self-care, talking about like taking a bath and using a face mask or something like that. And I'm like, self-care sometimes is just telling someone how you feel.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, it can be as simple or as hard as that, depending on what your experiences are and stuff. So,
yeah, you're right. Yeah. Self-care is a lot more than bubble baths and treating yourself to your favorite restaurant.
Yeah, for sure. Which are all nice things, but we also have to do introspective work sometimes. I had a friend who on Facebook one time said that she was sad and upset, basically. And she was taking time to sit in those feelings, is I think the way she worded it. And I grew up, like my dad would get mad at me when I would cry. And I know like all the reasons why he did that, besides the way he was raised, but also because I found out later in life that he didn't like it when I cried, obviously, because he wanted to fix it. And he couldn't. And so in response, the only response he knew to do was to get mad, because that's, the way he was raised. So, but he loved me. That's just, we are a product of the way we're raised.
Yeah.
And so when she said that on Facebook though, I was like, oh, you're supposed to actually feel those feelings when you have them, and not just try to push them aside and go distract yourself, because that's not healthy. Oh, that makes sense now.
Yeah. So some of the work that I do with clients is just about learning to identify what feelings we're having,
right?
And learning to be more in touch with our bodies, because that's where our feelings are. If I catch somebody kind of saying, well, I kind of feel like this is the problem, blah, 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 then I'm like, no, you're in your head. So we need to stop you being in your head and actually go and find the actual feeling that you're feeling in your body right now. And then it's about, how do we feel the feeling so that it flows through us and doesn't get stuck?
Right. Which I think is hard for humans because of, the way that we're raised, but also like societal pressures, and stuff like that. That's a very interesting topic in general.
Yeah. And of course, in people pleaser mode, we're just so worried about everyone else's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So we end up agreeing to do something, and maybe we like resent the other person for it, but secretly. We're so worried about, secretly, but we're not going to admit it, and then we'll just kind of feel guilty about the whole thing. And just, wow, there's a real powerful inner critic going on there.
Oh yeah, super. Yeah, we were talking before how, I'm a people pleaser, and I saw something that said that we're that way basically because we're brought up or taught to believe that one way of putting it could be our worth to someone else is the things that we do for them. And that's partially why we do that. But also, just we're raised to believe that that's how you show love to people sometimes, which can cause you, to start being a people pleaser at a very young age. And that's in raising our own children. I always feel like every generation tries to do better than the last generation. And like, that's all of our goal is just to do better than our parents did for us, and our parents can only do what they were able to do and given the tools to do. But I hope that that's, a part of evolution, basically.
Yeah. And for me, it's not about, blaming our parents or, blaming other people or even blaming ourselves. Because we just do what we know how to do.
Right.
We really do. And we do judge ourselves really harshly. And so, again, part of the work is introducing a much more kinder and self-compassionate voice.
Right.
For both us and for other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just recognizing we are all imperfect.
Right. Yeah. Self-talk is incredibly important.
Yeah. And I would agree, the roots of people pleasing, it really is that I think when we were younger, there was something about, our needs weren't met. And so we kind of turned it around and like learnt to look after other people and make sure that their needs were met.
Right.
Maybe in the hope that at some point our needs will get met. And so you kind of end up with this kind of giving to get relationships. It's like, well, if I love you and I look after you, then you'll love me back, right?
Right.
And of course it doesn't really work like that.
Right. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about boundaries and doing things like that in relationships? Or is there maybe a way that people who don't know, because I know like when I was like 19 and 20 years old, I didn't know anything about boundaries.
So I love boundaries. Yeah. Right. I didn't know anything about them either. The boundaries are basically about what is okay for you and what isn't. It's about where do I end and then you begin.
Yeah.
And indicators that you might have poor boundaries are things like that you end up doing stuff that you don't want to do, or you take responsibility for other people's feelings.
Right.
Or that you complain and you blame, but you just stand there, like you don't do anything about it. You just kind of say how unhappy you are, but you just continue in it.
Yeah.
Whereas, somebody with healthy boundaries, they're very clear about what is okay for them and what's not, and they communicate them, and they have much healthier relationships. And boundaries come in kind of lots of different kinds as well. So, we can talk about physical boundaries. So that might be about like your personal space and, and who you let into, say, your home, for example, and under what circumstances.
Right.
There's time boundaries. So, it may be that you like going to a party, but you want to leave after 2 hours because you know that after 2 hours, you're just going to get cranky and tired and want to go home.
Yeah.
So time boundaries is a really key one. And then emotional boundaries. So this is about saying, okay, well, these are my feelings and I'm responsible for them. And you can have your feelings and you're responsible for them. And I don't have to take on responsibility for what you feel. It's kind of having that very clear line between us. Yeah.
My husband and I had to learn that. Because even, so I learned that, I don't remember how or where I learned that somehow, but basically that I'm not responsible for the way he reacts, because he can be very reactive and he knows this about himself. And so I told him that one day and he immediately was like offended. And I was like, but no, like that's a freeing statement here. I'm not responsible for your actions or reactions or the way that you feel, and you're not responsible for mine. So if you take something that I say personally, then you need to go in and decide why you feel that way just as much as I do. You know, I have to go in and decide why something that you say or the way that you say something offends me. And it's not on you to figure that out or ask me what's wrong even. Which was a hard lesson for us because he very much enjoyed being chased whenever he would get upset. And I don't like to chase.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, for me, you know, there are times when, you know, I argue with my partner and I get triggered and I can now recognize that, you know, I'm on the journey of recovery, but there are times when my body remembers stuff from the past.
Right.
So, for example, you know, just even the getting into an argument, you know, my body will kind of tense up.
Exactly.
Because my body remembers what it was like when I was with my ex. And so I have to remind myself, it's okay now. Like, I don't need to feel that way now. You know, I'm safe. You know, nothing bad is happening. You know, arguments are healthy. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I was with someone one time and this memory is, it impacts me. I don't know why, but it is. And I was with someone and we were walking up to a house and there was someone at another house they were hollering, being loud, basically back and forth to each other. I don't know what about, couldn't understand what they were saying, but they were just them being loud in general made the person that I was with tense up immediately. And they were like, I don't like that. Like, see that over there? They pointed it out and were like, cause I didn't even notice it, but they were like, that bothers me. That immediately makes me tense. And I'm like, that's probably PTSD. Like that's a real thing that happens in relationships. Like you don't have to be a soldier with a traumatic brain injury to have PTSD. That's, you know, that's a response that your physical body has. And you should probably go get that checked out.
Yeah.
And talk about it with someone who knows much more about it than I do, because I sure don't.
Yeah.
Do you find that happens often with some of the women that you work with?
I think a lot of us have experienced some kind of trauma. You know, there's like big T traumas in life.
Right.
You know, huge life events that really affect people. But I think there are kind of small T traumas as well.
Right.
That just get us kind of stuck in particular patterns and get us used to responding in particular ways, which, you know, maybe served us when we were young, you know, kept us safe. So, for example, a lot of people that are stuck in people pleasing are, you know, don't want to speak up. They don't want to say what's on their mind. And that was certainly the case for me. I was like, who am I to say what I'm thinking? And that's just like an automatic kind of response, is to go quiet and silent.
Right.
And it feels really scary to start speaking up. But yes, back to boundaries, back to boundaries.
Sorry, yeah.
Because I love boundaries. Yeah.
Right, same.
Yeah. So for me, it's been a journey to figure out how to do boundaries, and I kind of found that there were like these steps that I went through, and on the basis of that, I wrote a free ebook for people on building healthy boundaries in relationships. Because
they're incredibly important.
Yeah, they're really important. And for me, it starts off with turning your attention inwards. So if you are somebody that is used to looking after everyone else, it's like, turn that wonderful attention that you give to everyone else, turn it onto yourself, and start asking yourself, when you feel a bit upset or uncomfortable or pissed off with someone, instead of worrying about them, ask yourself, what do I feel? What do I think? And what do I need?
And by the way, that's not being selfish in a bad way that we often, or I used to often correlate to, all of that. Being selfish can be a good thing.
Yeah. And of course, like, this is like the dread of somebody that's coming out of people pleasing, is like, oh no, I don't want to be a selfish person.
Yeah.
And of course there will be some people in your life who really want you to stay in that people pleasing pattern because it served them. Like they were taking advantage of that. Yeah. And so when you start to change, they may say to you, oh well, you're just being selfish now. Because they're trying to hit your buttons and they want you to go back to what you were doing before. But we don't take that crap.
That's right. So I noticed that transformational is actually in your title. And I worked with a transformational therapist who does, it's called rapid transformational therapy, or RTT. Is that something that you do? Because you said something else that she said.
I'm not familiar with rapid transformational therapy. No. So transformational coaching, how it perhaps differs from traditional coaching is that it goes a lot deeper. When I was training, we learned about a range of different ways of helping clients, things like cognitive behavioral techniques and tools that are adapted for coaching. Narrative coaching, storytelling and using different worldviews, tuning into our intuition and honing our presence and our ability to really deeply listen. And also tools used in transactional analysis and kind of work with different ego states. Plus some other bits and pieces. So they kind of gave us, if you like, a huge toolbox of quite deep tools and psychological models that we could use. And the idea was that, we take away from that what we really like working with and what most helps our clients. And we each go away and become the unique coach that we are, which I think is just beautiful. So the coaching school that I train with, Animas, it turns you into who you are meant to be as a coach. It's not a cookie cutter approach, not everyone kind of comes out the same.
Yeah. No, I think you would very much enjoy learning about rapid transformational therapy.
Cool.
I've spoken to two on here. Rosalind, if you catch her episode, she's one of them. If you just want to listen to her episode, she's very knowledgeable about it because the lady who created it is Marissa Peer, and she actually learned under her when Marissa Peer originally started the entire school that she does. But she says exactly the same things that you're saying. I mean, they use, CBT, they use hypnotherapy, as one of their tools, things like that. So they, that's great. And I think you'd love it. You, I mean, obviously, however, are doing just fine the way that you're doing things, though. So,
yeah, I mean, one of the kind of additional tools that I use with a lot of clients that are open to it is meditation and
yeah.
mindfulness, because I found that was so helpful in just taking a step back from our own thoughts and feelings and being able to just detach from them.
Yeah.
And begin to see them for what they are,
right.
and be able to perhaps challenge them and say, actually, is there a different way for me to think about things and feel about things?
I did not used to know, so I still probably don't know how to meditate or and I didn't understand. Like, people would always say, "Oh, I meditate," and I'm like, "Cool." And I'm like, "How you do that? How do you do that?" And they'd say, "Oh, you just sit in silence for like 5 minutes." And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. First of all, I don't know if I could do that. But second of all, what about your thoughts? Like, aren't you supposed to clear your mind or something? And they're like, yeah, you just watch them pass and move on. And I'm like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense. But then the other day, we are fortunate enough to have a pool in our backyard. And I was laying in the pool outside, and I was just floating, and my ears were under the water, and I couldn't hear anything at all. There's not like a ringing in my ear that I hear sometimes or anything like that. And I was like, and I closed my eyes and I was like, oh, now I get it. Now I get it. This is so nice.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Because I really think there are activities that are meditative. So, I think guys that go fishing or, just going for a walk in nature,
I love
can be
that
very
meditative.
meditative.
Oh man, super.
Even though you're not kind of, sitting in a lotus pose.
Right.
Don't necessarily have to do that.
Right.
I mean, for me, the kind of the very like basic form of meditation is that just like you can sit for 2 minutes and just observe what you are thinking and what you're feeling. But of course, there are so many different kinds of meditations out there. Some people really like mantras, other people like guided meditations.
Yeah.
And it's finding what works for you.
For sure. Yeah. I'm definitely going to be going in the pool more where no one is. And because I had to like focus on my breath, because if I hold my breath for too long, I'll just start sinking. And so I had to, do all those things. And I'm like, this is what meditation is. This is what I need to do.
Lucy, you found what works for you, which is great.
I did. Yeah. Finally. I've been trying to find it for months.
Yeah, and it is a practice. There are definitely some days when I don't really feel like it.
Right.
When we first, for example, went into lockdown, and I was feeling very affected by it, and I kind of felt the weight of the world.
Yeah.
I didn't want to meditate. And that's when I most needed to meditate.
Right.
Because that's when my brain was kind of going mad with what ifs and different scenarios. And I made myself continue to meditate for at least 10 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I persevered, because it really did help me through that time, even though I didn't feel like it. And, and I found it harder to concentrate and to meditate. It's a practice. So, some days it's going to feel great, and other days it's going to be like blah. That's fine.
Right. Yeah. Sit in your feelings on those days. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for coming on the Teachable Soul and sharing your teachable moments with our teachable souls out there. Were there any other teachable moments that you wanted to share specifically? I
think looking back on my relationship with my husband, as I said, the red flags were there, and I ignored them.
Yeah.
I think believe what people tell you, believe what you see in front of you.
Yeah.
And don't create dreams and stories about people.
for sure. And
Yeah.
hold on to them as if they're reality. Yeah.
Mm.
Or that they could even be reality.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I feel that. Well, if anybody else wants to contact you for some of your transformational relationship coaching, where would they get a hold of you?
Best place to find me is my website, which is my name. So it's just www.helensnape.com.
Right. And you are not related to Snape from Harry Potter. I am certain of it.
No, but it's spelled the same way.
Yes. Yeah, when I saw that was the first thing I thought. I was like, oh, Harry Potter. Of course.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to share your teachable moments with us.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
You have been listening to the Teachable Soul podcast. You can find us on any social media platform, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram as The Teachable Soul, or on Twitter as Teachable Soul. Also, if you'd like to help support the show, you can find us at patreon.com/The Teachable Soul. You can also visit our website for more information at theteachablesoul.com.